I am listening to a playlist of music that I have of all kinds of videos that I have found all across YouTube, and it is here in the chat if you wish to listen along with me. I cannot have it in the stream because the stream will be entirely muted if I have it playing. So you can check out this playlist. The current video that I am listening to is called Emotional Music, Beautiful Orchestral. It's about 4 hours long. It has all kinds of music on there from all kinds of different artists. So I like to listen to this stuff while I'm writing, while I'm drawing, while I'm pretty much doing anything artistic. So feel free to listen along with that playlist. All right, now let's get on to why we're here. I've done pretty much all the editing of the chapter, the major editing of the chapter, and now I'm just going back through and editing all the pieces that my Grammarly over here is decided that it does not like, and addressing those problems as they pop up, so that way I can have at least sound like I know what I'm talking about. Whether or not that actually comes across is a completely different story, but that is not why we're here. All right. So now we're back to the part in the chapter, for those of you who kind of remember or not. We have found the girl Aleska, and she has recruited us into delivering food all across Ariant, which she and some of the other sand bandits have lifted from the Queen's personal store chamber to deliver to the people of Ariant because they are just literally starving. So we come to this point, for those of you who are watching the stream, where you see the orange highlighted part, and we'll go from there. If Jano sent you, I suppose you have some merit. The first task I need help with is taking food and is distributing the food to the people, Aleska said, showing Helen a stash of vegetables and dried meats near where they stood. Oops. I was about to distribute these when you came and surprised me. No, let's get rid of that. When you surprised me. The Queen has taken all but the desert, turning the town into this ruin. Since taxes are so ridiculously high... No, we'll leave it at that. The people have nothing to eat and nothing to buy food with. A few others and I managed to smuggle this food out of the palace yesterday, but Jano called them to another mission. I can't deliver this food fast enough on my own, so if you five could help me, it would be much appreciated and expose you to the people so they will hopefully learn to trust you. Helen teleported down down to the street and brought Lilin up, explaining their mission. All right. Why doesn't it like this? Helen. Teleported. Helen disappeared. And bringing Lilin up to the roof and explained their mission. What, seriously? Oh, okay. Alright, Nathan, Eris, and Lilin will make up a team and run food through the city, returning once they have delivered their portion. Helen and I will go on our own. I trust that you, Aleska, will also be delivering food? Olsen asked, as the six of them grabbed a bundle of food. Aleska, nope. Nodded and continued to explain. On each door that needs food, there will be a small circle in the bottom corner of the door. Okay, the bottom corner. There will be each door that needs food. Oh, okay, I see. On each door that needs food, a small circle will be on the bottom corner. Yeah, I can't talk all of a sudden. A small circle will be in the bottom corner. No mark, no food. Okay, so I can get rid of this. With a little tidbit of information, they headed out, weaving their way through the entire... No. They weaved through the entire village. Okay. And delivered all the stashed food by that afternoon. From time to time, Lillian would stop and heal a small wound, or Helen would stop and take care of more severe issues and wounds. Once done, Aleska brought them back to the safe house at the end of the day. Jano, all the food has been delivered thanks to the help of these 5. Jano nodded as he lit another oil lamp in the falling shadows. I see. I suppose then you should be filled in on what exactly happened here in Ariant. Jano breathed, sitting at his desk and readying to tell the tale. Close to 22 years ago, Ariant was ruled by Abdullah VIII and his lovely queen Ardith. Together, they made sure all were well taken. They ensured? Yes, okay. Okay. Ariant's citizens were cared for. While we worked the mines producing our finest export, Lydium. The alchemists of Magatia traded for the gem handsomely for its properties, while others came from around Ossyria to purchase jewelry made from this extraordinary ore. Go ahead. Okay. All right. The alchemists of Magatia traded handsomely for its properties, while others came from all over Ossyria to purchase jewelry made from this extraordinary ore. However, a dark day descended when the queen suddenly died. No one could offer any explanation for her death. No sooner had we buried the queen than she appeared. Arida. At first, she seemed to be a gift from the heavens sent down to us to help the grieving king, who claimed to be a fairy from Orbis. She made sure things ran smoothly while the king recovered from his shock. Over time, the two of them seemed to be cultivating a relationship, and before long, they were happily wed. let's leave it alone. That's when the changes started. Taxes began to rise as caravans loaded heavily with gold. Loaded with gold, silver, gems, and fine silks would arrive daily. No sooner had the taxes been raised. Come on. Then they were raised again. Let's see. What is it done not like there? Okay, so I just... Okay. Okay, why don't you like this? And they were raised, okay. No sooner had the taxes been raised than they were raised again. As the whole of Ariant was slowly deteriorating. We're going to dismiss that one. With no funds to repair anything in the city, the depravity only became worse. As did the taxes. Okay. With no funds to repair anything in the city, the depravity, as did the taxes, became worse. When the people couldn't pay the taxes, couldn't pay their taxes, she began demanding... Why? Oh, okay. She demanded our only export and lifeline for Ariant. Lydium stones. When the mines ran out, we began searching the desert for the gems, venturing further away from the city. Hold on. The way the game portrays it is like this lumpy kind of like, almost think of like obsidian almost, or like maybe even like cooled lava, kind of how it's like bubbly or something like that. But you can take that ore and then you can refine it into like this giant diamond looking thing. So it kind of like you could almost kind of think of it kind of like jade almost, where it is a gem but it's like a rock more so than anything, and you have to like cut it and polish it. But it also, like, the way this I'm portraying it here, Lydium is also it has strange properties to it. At least the way the game portrays it, it was made passing mention how Megatia, the alchemist town, would buy Lydium from Ariant because of its strange properties, and they were able to use it in their alchemy as like a power source for machines and things. So yeah, in at least the way I'm portraying it here in the story, it was originally wanted for its alchemic properties, whereas Arda and other people would take like some of like the lesser grade ore and turn it into jewelry. Let me see if I can find a picture of it, because it's actually a pretty fancy looking thing. Hold on, let me push this button over here. Yeah. Okay. That's okay. It's all good. All right. Here we go. Okay, so let me see if I can blow this up. All right, that's about as big as it's going to get. So, all right. So this is what the Lydium gem looks like. I don't know how well you can see it, because that's about as big as I can make it. Ah. And then the ore itself, let me see. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know how well you can see it there. Let's see if I can. Yeah, see, it kind of looks like cooled lava. It has like these purple gem pieces in it, and it has black ore pieces in it. And then you can kind of like refine it down into that diamond shape, or that diamond thing, which is this. Yeah. So at least that's how. Okay. So it at least the way I'm portraying it here, it's kind of like shares properties as both a mineral and a gem at the same time. So it's kind of like in this superposition of jewelry. Okay. When the mines ran out, we began searching the desert for the gems. Oh, little tidbit here, information. Way back when Ariant first came out in the game, I was there when that happened. Yeah, a whole section of the map. It was like a level 75 to 80 area of the map. And back then, you also had to hunt monsters to get any kind of ore for any kind of gem. There was there's diamond ore, sapphire ore, steel, adamantium, bronze, orichalcon, mithril. Just I've heard it said many different ways. Orichalcum. It's all basically the same thing. Okay. But but you had to hunt the monsters in order to get the ores. But the ores were stupid rare. I think they had like a 1% chance of dropping or something like that out of the monster kills. And even that depends on how powerful you were. 2 or 3 hits sometimes. But this was across the board. And Lydium, sure, was also part of these monster drops that you could get, but the only thing that was very much pain in the butt is they only dropped from monsters that spawned in Ariant. So yeah, either that or you had a bunch of people going to like the free market that was available back in the day of MapleStory, like spamming messages saying buying Lydium gems, paying X amount of miso per ore, blah blah blah. I can't remember what it was. I think it was a couple quests in Ariant because the real Queen Arida wanted it because, you know, it's a gem. Ooh. And then I think there was a couple quests you had to do in Megatia where you actually needed to get the solidified, like the full gem piece, or the full gem. And you needed 2 of those. The only problem is in order to make an actual gem, you needed 6 ore. So you spent many an hour just grinding away with double drop coupons in the game, hoping you could get enough Lydium ore in like a 3-hour play session. Yeah, and even then that was just not an option back then because the miso drop rates were a lot lower. I mean, okay, let's put it this way. The way the MapleStory economy works right now, at least on the server I play, Elysium, you are considered flat broke unless you have more than 100 and... No. If you have less than 250 million miso on you at all times. That number back in those days was 50,000 miso. So, and if you had anything more than about 100,000 miso, you were considered like a billionaire. So it was not fun, especially when you go to purchase things like in the free market. It was just like, all you could do was basically shop around going, oh, I wish I could buy that sword. 800,000 miso? No, thank you. Nowadays, you get gear in there that people are selling for hundreds of billions of miso, and it's just, no. All right. So when the mines ran out, we began searching the city for desert for gems, venturing further and further away from the city, having to go as far east as the edge of Minar Forest. Now, the lithium deposits are so small that it takes 4 camel loads of lithium sand just to make 1 stone. Of sand to find enough ore to make 1 stone. Okay, why don't you like that? Okay, we're gonna get rid of you. Okay. The lithium deposits are so small that it takes 4 camel loads of sand to find enough ore to make 1 stone. 1 small stone, we shall say. Once the Black Mage had risen, however, things became much worse. Oh. Okay. On the worser. The worser sister sauce. Worcestershire. Come on, chat. We can cheer for him. Get him to do it. Yay! He did it. However, things became much worse once the Black Mage had risen. Strange new creatures she used as her guards and soldiers began appearing. Some were large and small cacti, others were the salamanders that lived around the oasis, and still others were the sand serpents. We sand bandits tried to help by raising a small army of our own to acquire food and money from the queen. But with her mutants... why don't you like that? Okay. Okay. We sand bandits tried to help by raising a small army to acquire food and money from the queen. But with her mutant soldiers patrolling this town and the king not seeming to do anything about it, it has become near impossible for us to fight the queen any longer. We have run dry of any hope. Okay, so I know that was kind of stupid. Let's try that again. Queen any longer. We have run dry of any hope. Jano finished, hanging his head. Helen looked to Lilin, who nodded, as did Olsen. Then knelt and placed a hand on Jano's shoulder. I, Helen Ullman, the Guardian Mage, Olsen Delore, the Guardian Ninja, Nathan the Spearman, Eris the Cannonade, and Lilin, the wife of Iran, are here to help. Tell us what you need, and we shall do it. Okay, scene change! Now, that was everybody who is in, at least the way the chapter is going, everybody has split into 2 groups. One stayed in Ariant, the other went to Megatia. Each town actually has a storyline, but I'd actually have to go back and actually play through it because I'm not sure what stayed and what is there and what got cut out in the storyline of Ariant, because it was actually a pretty interesting story a long time ago when it first came out. You actually did like this whole deep dive trying to investigate why the town was basically falling apart, only to find out that the queen, at least it was heavily implied that the queen was faking being a fairy from Orbis, who everybody just like, oh, it's a fairy from Orbis. It basically treated her like their own personal goddess, and she began just ordering people around and demanding just the finest things in life. While she lived in luxury, everybody else was basically starving. She convinced them somehow, I guess, and at the same time, if I remember right, in the original story, she put like a really strong sleeping spell over the king, so he just either that or made him very apathetic as to what's happening, so just let her run amok with whatever she wanted to do. At least originally, I think so. But then when things started getting bad, they started kind of like just bucking this thing that, you know, she always brought up that she was a fairy of Orbis. And, okay, let me back up on that one. Orbis, back in the day, was a major port city in the game. You'd have to go from Victoria Island to Orbis, and then you'd be able to go to Orbis to like anywhere else in the world. But Orbis was also supposed to be the home of the nymph fairies, because there are two different types. There's the nymph fairies and there's the sylph fairies. The sylph fairies are portrayed as having like these large feathered white wings, whereas the nymph fairies have more so like little delicate insect wings, and they're like much smaller, and they live in the forest of Elenia on Victoria Island, the town where one would become a mage. Also in Orbis, I think that was a place where, if I remember right, it was supposed to be... I never did finish the storyline to figure out exactly what happened, but I believe that's where a goddess of Maple World used to live, and like all the sylph fairies were like her servants. And like attendants or something like that. So basically being a fairy of Orbis was like a really big deal, because basically you are in the court of the goddess of Maple World or something like that. Pretty much. I mean, here, let me see if I can find a picture of her. All right, first let me find a picture of a true sylph fairy of Orbis. No. No. This is all based on stuff from the game. Oh no, I'm just trying to show you what an actual fairy of Orbis would look like. Just so that way when I show you the queen who's pretending to be a fairy, you can kind of see where they might have messed up. What's her name? I can't remember what her name is. No, it's not that. Is it Creo? Yes. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this right here... Oh, come on. Okay. So this is Creel the Fairy. She is a shop, like a general store shopkeeper. And she, like, the animation is of her, like, she has her wings are flapping, but this is basically what a true fairy of Orbis looks like. You know, it has these big wings. These are supposed to be white, I think, and it's just based on, like, the position and where it's coming onto the website right now. This is what she looks like. This is a true fairy of Orbis. Now, if I were to look up, let's see, Maples. Well, you know, make your own assumption how you will. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is Arda. Just kind of really gaudy and really her dialogue, she is so pompous. So just the way it was explained in the storyline, it casts a lot of doubt as to whether or not she really is a fairy of Orbis. So, again, just the way the dialogue was given, she, like, overplayed her part as being a fairy of Orbis. So, it's like, okay, maybe she is, but at the same time, maybe she isn't. Because it's just, she's really hammering on that point that she's a fairy from Orbis. And suspiciously hammering it home. And, like, I think one of the missions you were giving her is that she wanted you to go out and find Lydium gems, like I said before. The other one is that she was tired of the very plain tea that they served in Ariant, and that she required only the finest tea that you could find in Ariant, which was like, say, if the standard tea they served in Ariant was like the Lipton tea bags you get, she only wanted, like, I don't know, Indian black imported from 3 miles south of some unnamed island or something like that costs like $80 a pound or something. I don't know. But yeah, like, she just, all the things she does, and it was just, no. And, like, if also in the original storyline, if I remember correctly, you never do wake the king up. Or find out why he's just, like, kind of sitting there all apathetic. He's just kind of, and that's it. All right, so then back to Megacia. All right. Alright, so a little tidbit here to catch you up, guys up. Han is an actual NPC from Megacia. Megacia is an alchemic town. Now, by the way, I should mention that everything I'm telling you is from the game. It has nothing to do with my story. Well, my story is kind of based on that, but what I'm telling you is from the game, the actual game. Han is an NPC you first meet when you come into Megacia, and he basically gives you the skinny of why the town is completely divided over their beliefs. And tells you that you can join either one or both factions. However, in order to do that, you need to pass a test on either side. But he gives you basically what amounts to a cheat, so that on one side you have the Xenumists, who I think they called it true alchemy, if I remember correctly, where you just use, like, raw materials to create whatever you want or whatever you need. And then so he gives you this little, like, box of stuff that all you need to do is, like, set it down in a certain spot, and then it will turn into something else, and it's like, okay, yeah, you know what you're doing. Welcome to the Xenumists. And then the other side, which was the Alcadnos? Yeah, Alcadnos. Their alchemy was kind of like biomechanics and, like, cybernetics almost, but, like, steampunky. So the test for that was basically he gave you a list of answers and say, okay, These are the answers. Just remember them in this order, and you'll pass. I was like, okay. So then you go into talk to the big guy who gives you the test, and you just blurt out the answers. He gives you some like weird questions, like you have no idea what he's talking about, but you just give the answer. He's like, all right, you seem legit. Welcome to the El Cadnos. Yeah, pretty much. But later you find out why the city is so divided is because something called the Great Circle that they used to use, which was like their main, most powerful alchemic circle that everybody used to use, somewhere along the way collapsed and like set off a giant explosion in the middle of town, and they started blaming each other for whose fault it was that happened. And you also come to find out that the Black Mage, before he became the Black Mage, grew up in Megacia. So, and there's some ties to that too. So it's all a little fuzzy on how it worked in the game, because I never completed it the old version before it changed to pretty much what it is now. So yeah. Well, because I looked it up. Did a lot of digging back in the day. Okay, let's put it this way. The game lore before, from way back into the before times, the only game lore is that there was a threat of this guy named the Black Mage who was going to destroy the entire world, and you needed to train to become stronger and defeat him and save the world. That was the entire lore. But each town that you would go to would have its own like little mini lore quest lines. I think every class, every explorer class, which was the only ones that were there before, had their own towns that they would go to, that they would start in. The warriors had I should back up. You had, at the very beginning, I believe there was Maple Island, where like every new character you ever made started. And basically it was Tutorial Island. That's basically all it was. And then at level, depending on which class you were going to try to go for, between levels 8 and 10, I think maybe it was even at like level 7, you left Maple Island and you went to Victoria Island, which was like your first steps into the major world. And then you got told directions on how to get, like, what class you wanted to become. You got told directions on how to get to each one of these towns. If you wanted to be a warrior, you had to go to the northern part of the island called Parion, which is basically the like desert mountains kind of deal. If you wanted to become a thief, you had to go to what amounted to like a really big city, with like New York or LA or Dallas or something like that. It was a city that you had to go to called Kerning City. If you wanted to become a mage, you had to go to a town on the western side of the island called Elenia, which was tucked way back in the middle of a forest with the nymph fairies. And if you wanted to become a bowman or an archer, you went to the southern side of the island to the town Hennessy's. And then once the pirates came along, if you wanted to become a pirate, there was, beside Hennessy's, there was a dock where the Nautilus, a giant submarine, was docked, where their captain, Corinne, would teach you how to become a pirate. Each of the towns had their own little storylines that kind of went with them. And I think it went from, except for the mages, which started at level 8, every class started at level 10, and then it went from like 10 to 15 that you could play out this entire storyline. And each one had their own little stories. Perion, I think, was trying to make sure that the people were safe. The people of Perion were safe, and providing food for the people there. You also ran into this girl named Ayan, who would say that she had been with the people of Perion for as long as she can remember, since she was like a little girl, but she doesn't know where she came from. Kerning had like this guy who was like a really big conspiracy theorist who was trying to work out if somebody was trying to keep illegal experiments in the sewers below the city, and kind of had like this whole underground black market kind of feel to it, where you were transporting goods back and forth. You also met this kid named Alex who was there, who said he was from Hennessy's. If you went to Hennessy's, you had a whole storyline there of a doctor who had been studying ancient golems from way back before the beginning of the game, and that he had lost his daughter. And if you continue that storyline through, you come to find out that this doctor had been separated from his daughter by a bad attack of these golems when she was a child, and you come to find out that child had wandered all the way to Perion and grew up as Ayan. And also in Hennessy's, you met the chief, Chief Stan. You come to find out that he has had family issues with one of his sons, who turns out to be Alex, who ran away to Kerning City. I can't remember what the storyline... Oh, Grendel the Really Old, who was the master for all the mages, you come to find out that he hasn't had exactly the best past in the world, as he and a couple of his friends dabbled in some magic that was a little too powerful for them, and one of them is now a lich that lives in a big area of zombies, and the other one is a ghost who is haunting a nearby Lupin, which is a monkey that lives around the area, which they don't anymore, and is constantly trying to figure out a way how to put his friends to rest. And then in Nautilus, you come to find out that there's a whole kind of a subplot kind of happening on between this race of beings called the Walians, who are basically narwhals that can take on human form. Yeah, that's what they're called, the Walians. And their leader, I can't remember what his name is, but he's actually in love with Captain Corinne. And she's trying to figure out a way to let him down because she's not interested in him. So it's like each town had their own little interesting stories to go with it, which sadly don't exist anymore. Yeah, they're gone. They reworked them. I mean, some of the quests are still there, but the story that went with them is gone. Me and and the old guard of Maple Story. You might be able to find it somewhere, but if you can, I don't know where to find it. You might be able to find it somewhere. But there is... And that's just the beginning island. There's tons more than that. Okay, so back to the story here. Han began searching through piles of paperwork and books once the group had filed into the room, telling them what he knew about the town. A few years ago, this town was divided in two because of a massive collapse in what was known as the Great Circle. Let's see, okay. Once led by Alcester, who resides in El Nath. The circle was built below ground. Why don't you like that? Well, kind of think of it like every alchemist had their own personal circles in their bases that they could use, but this one was like really old and no one knew how to like reconstruct it if it broke, but it was like stupid powerful. The way you end up seeing it, again, from the olden times in the game, the way you end up seeing it, it's like a drawing, but it's an actual physical thing. It's kind of like, have you ever seen like spell runes that were given, like, or you're playing RuneScape, right? Okay, is there a mechanic in there where like you're given runes as a representative of certain things or anything like that? Okay, so kind of think of it like what is this infused essence. It's both a thing and like a construct at the same time, or not. Think of it more so like, do you remember the circle, the alchemic? Let me back up. Have you ever seen Full Metal Alchemist? Okay, yeah. Depending on like the runes, at least the way Maple Story had portrayed them, depending on how the runes in the circle and like the shapes that were drawn within the outer rim and stuff like that would determine how powerful these alchemic circles were. So, like, if you drew one with 4 sides, it had like X amount of power. One with 5 sides had X amount of power. But because I can only imagine it was because as the circle gets more and more powerful, it takes more and more of these alchemists to make sure it maintains its integrity. So, like, a 4-sided alchemic circle maybe takes 1 or 2 people, depending on what you're doing, but then it, like, gets exponentially higher as the intensity grows. So, like, it becomes like a 20-sided circle. Sure, it's stupid powerful, but you also need to know the runes that would go in the outer rim to make sure the power remains stable, and you probably need something like 60 alchemists all there working in tandem to make sure it doesn't go bonkers. Yeah, sure. Oh, look at there. Oh, oops. Yeah. Well, there was... Let's see. If I remember right, the story of Megatia said that something happened with the Great Circle. I can't remember exactly what, if it was an explosion or if it was a failure or something. Something happened around the Great Circle itself. I can't remember what. But well, yeah, destabilized or collapsed, however you want to see it, something bad happened. At least that's the way the game portrayed it. How I'm portraying it here is that this great circle was drawn on a very sturdy piece of stone. So it was very hard for it to, like, break apart. But then the stone, at least according to everybody else, their experiment that they ran was so intense that it broke the stone, thus misaligning part of the circle and causing it to destabilize and then release basically what amounted to a nuclear bomb that was inside the dome of this magical circle that was happening. When only come to later find out in the chapter that there was a jealous alchemist who was set up to be the new leader of Megatia at the time, who was immediately passed over for this new guy who came in a couple months, who was getting, if his experiment that he was working on, if it succeeded, he would be appointed the leader in like a few months, whereas this other guy had been training for years. And he was just super jealous, so he decided that he would make this experiment fail by cracking the stone that the Great Circle was drawn on. And thus setting off a nuke in the dead center of town. No, don't worry. Okay. So. Pretty much, yes. That's all you needed to know right there. Okay. This other guy, his name is Russalon. Russalon was poised to be the new leader of Megatia, as like master alchemist of Megatia. Basically what amounts to the mayor. But, and so Russalon was about to be this new mayor, but then another guy came along. His name was DeLang, Dr. DeLang, and that's Dr. Long. They're based on each other, but they have slightly different outcomes. Dr. DeLang brought his experiment. I can't remember exactly what the experiment was, because it was, again, it's been so long since I did it again. DeLang brought his experiment to Megatia to do, and after a few months, everybody's like, hey, this is a pretty cool experiment. If this succeeds, why don't you become the new master alchemist of Megatia, instead of this Russalon guy who's been studying for years and years? So Russalon decides, you know what? Fine. His whole appointment as mayor or master alchemist hinges on the fact that his experiment will succeed. So all that needs to happen is his experiment to fail. And instead of being the smart man, instead of like messing with things on the background that would be just a little bit messed up so it wouldn't succeed, he decided to take the thing that the experiment was being conducted in and break that instead. Right. Right. Or no, like basically taking like a 10-ton floor jack into the Great Circle, jacking up part of it, and then making it blow up. That's basically what he did. Well, it did the alchemic version of it, yeah. But yeah. Alright. The Alchemists of Megatia. Oh, yes. In the beginning of Sacred Tears, and where we are now in Guardians, they are... Sacred Tears is a parallel. There is a reason for this, and if you want to find out once we reach the end of what we're doing in the background, if you want to find out exactly what's happening, you can read further forward on Sacred Tears, the written story, and find out exactly what's happening. Or I can tell you off stream. Okay. The alchemists of Megatia constructed this circle below ground, but encompassed the entirety of what was then Megatia. Or what was then Megatia. It allowed great alchemists to make remarkable things, such as levistones, and refine hard metals like mithril, orichalcum, adamantium, and amalgam. However, one alchemist stood out from the rest by the name Ordon Delang. When he first came to this village, he was an average human doctor. Now, mind you, some of this is inspired by the game. The rest of this is kind of made up, kind of messed with on my own. When he first came to this village, he was an average human doctor seeking a town where he and his newly married wife could settle down and be left alone. The humans who had come to his wedding disapproved of his marriage to a fairy of Orbis. It wasn't long after they had come here that their daughter Kini was born. Delang knew that they would outlive him. But through thousands of hours of learning, practicing, testing, and experiments, he was close to a breakthrough. But he was close to a breakthrough after thousands of hours of learning, practicing, testing, and experiments. It would allow him to make a body of both mechanical and biological makeup with Maid's help, and transfer his life force and memories into it using the life alchemy perfected by Carson. Let's see. Okay, so it would allow him to make a body of mechanical and biological makeup with Maid's help, and transfer his life force and memories into it using the life alchemy perfected by Carson. These three began to experiment, using the sand rats as test subjects to bond their life forces to a machine called roids. No matter the method they used, thousands of experiments failed. After so many failed attempts, Delang said he had found the answer to what he had been searching for, but wouldn't share his findings. He didn't even tell Maid or Carson what he'd found. One night, someone activated the Great Circle. The reaction was violent, and it collapsed after a strong earthquake rocked the whole of Megatia, darkening the sky to what it is now. Many alchemists lost their lives as part of the city collapsed into the great sinkhole. Into a massive sinkhole, and no one knew who activated the circle that led to this tragedy. Since both Carson and Maid were part of DeLange's experiment, they began to blame one another, tearing apart their methods for alchemy and blame. No. And that was just no. Don't like that. Since both Carson and Maid were part of DeLange's experiment, they began to blame one another and their factions. The infighting, suspicion, and blame eventually split the town. That is all I know. You'll have to investigate yourselves if you want more information. Moving a stack of books. Books? Sound like I'm talking with an Irish accent now. Moving a stack of books, he finally found a filing cabinet and pulled open a drawer. Ah, here it is. Now, I don't have enough for all of you to join one faction or the other. I only have enough items for 3 people to join the Xenumists and 3 the Alcadnos. Matthew looked around at them and sighed. He hoped they wouldn't have to split the group into factions poised against each other, risking their mission.
I will remain as a neutral party. If you should forget why we are here, then I shall remind you,
Grendel offered. Okay, well, I'd like to continue, guys, but that is where I'm going to have to call it for tonight. I have a pretty early day tomorrow, so at work, so I need to get to bed pretty soon on my end. So, thank you everyone for coming. I hope you were at least mildly entertained, and thank you ZMaster47 for joining in on the stream.